They had never seen men like this. Behind barbed wire on a bombed-out island, Japanese women prisoners whispered those words, staring at the black American soldiers bringing them water. The U.S. Army said, "No contact, no kindness, no crossing the line." But one sergeant couldn't look away. A harmonica in the dark, a wash line built in secret, small mercies that broke every rule. A white officer saw what was growing and decided to destroy it. A planted letter, stolen medicine, shackles closing around the truth. When a typhoon tore the island apart, one man had to choose: follow orders and let them drown, or defy everything and the water truck rattled to a stop near the fence, engine ticking in the late afternoon heat. Sergeant Isaiah Coleman stepped down from the cab, boots squelching in mud that had been shell-torn earth 2 days ago. The air still carried the smell of cordite and burnt metal. "Watch your step, Eddie," Isaiah said to the young private behind him. Beyond the barbed wire, shapes moved in the shadows of a torn canvas shelter. Women. Japanese women, prisoners of war. Sitting in the mud with hollow eyes and mud-streaked faces. Isaiah had seen the enemy before, dead on roadsides, wounded in field hospitals. But never like this. Never women. Never sitting and waiting. An MP leaned against the fence post, rifle slung over his shoulder. "About time. They've been crying for water since morning." Isaiah said nothing. He pulled the pipe sections from the truck bed, metal warm under his palms. The women watched him. He could feel their eyes. One of them stumbled forward when the MP opened the gate. She was young, maybe 20, wearing what used to be a nurse's uniform. Now it was rags. She reached for the water spigot with shaking hands. The MP shoved her back. "Wait your turn." Isaiah raised one hand. "Sir, she's just thirsty." The MP's face went red. "You telling me how to do my job, boy?" Isaiah kept his voice level. "No, sir. Just saying we got plenty of water." He knelt down in the mud beside the pipe, twisted the valve, and held his canteen under the trickle. When it filled, he offered it to the woman. She stared at him. Her eyes were dark, wide with something Isaiah couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or surprise. She took the canteen with both hands and drank. Behind her, the other women pressed closer to the wire. They whispered to each other in Japanese, voices rising and falling like wind through tall grass. Isaiah didn't understand the words, but he heard the wonder in them. One voice, clear and steady, rose above the rest. A young woman with her hair tied back stood near the gate, translating. "She says thank you." Isaiah nodded once. The translator's English was perfect, too perfect. It carried the faint rhythm of California. The tent smelled of kerosene and wet canvas. Isaiah sat on his cot, cleaning his rifle by the light of a single lantern. Around him, the other men of his squad settled in for the night. Eddie Brooks, his younger cousin, couldn't sit still. He paced the narrow space between the cots, boots scraping on wooden slats. "Did you see them?" Eddie said. "Those women. They looked so scared." "They should be scared," Doc Whitfield said from his corner. He was older than the rest of them, with gray in his hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "This is war. We're the enemy." "We gave them water," Eddie said. "That's all." Doc looked up from the medical kit he was organizing. "That MP saw you, Zay. Saw you hand that canteen over like you were serving Sunday tea." He shook his head. "You know what happens if they say you were too friendly." Isaiah knew. The rules were posted on every board in camp. No fraternization with enemy prisoners. No talking unless ordered. No contact. For a black sergeant, the punishment for breaking those rules would be swift and hard. "I gave her water," Isaiah said quietly. "Nothing more." "Nothing more is enough," Doc said. "You remember Corporal Jackson? They busted him down to private for smiling at a French girl. Smiling. And that girl was on our side." The tent went quiet. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering on the canvas roof. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled like old thunder. Isaiah pulled his harmonica from his pocket. The metal was warm from his body heat. He put it to his lips and played softly. Just a few notes of Go Down Moses. The melody drifted through the tent, low and mournful. Eddie stopped pacing. "My mama used to sing that in church." "Mine too," Isaiah said. He played another verse, letting the music fill the silence. The notes slipped through the tent flaps and carried on the humid air, traveling across the muddy ground toward the wire fence and the women beyond. Rain drummed on the canvas shelter. Aiko Takahashi sat with her back against the wooden post, arms wrapped around her knees. Around her, the other women huddled together for warmth. Sister Michiko, the oldest among them, moved through the group, checking foreheads for fever, offering quiet words of comfort. "Did you hear that?" one of the younger girls whispered in Japanese. Aiko listened. Through the rain, she heard it. A harmonica, playing slow and sad. The melody was strange, foreign, but it carried something familiar. Longing, sorrow, hope. "What is that music?" Sister Michiko asked. Aiko closed her eyes, reaching for words she had buried deep. Words from another life, before the war, before she left Los Angeles and everything she knew. "It's a spiritual," she said in Japanese, "an American song about freedom." The women stared at her. "How do you know this?" Sister Michiko's voice was sharp with suspicion. Aiko kept her face still. "I heard it once. Before." She didn't say where. Didn't mention the small apartment in Boyle Heights, the jazz on the radio, the corner store where she bought penny candy and the owner called her sweetheart. That life was gone. Speaking of it now would only bring questions she couldn't answer. The harmonica played on. The melody rose and fell like breathing. "Let my people go," Aiko whispered in English, so softly that no one could hear. The words of the song came back to her from some deep place. "Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go." One of the youngest girls, feverish and shaking, leaned against Aiko's shoulder. Aiko stroked her hair, humming along with the distant music. The girl's breathing slowed, her eyes closed. Sister Michiko watched from across the shelter. Her face was hard to read in the shadows. "Those soldiers," one woman said, "the ones who brought the water, they were black," another finished. "We've never seen men like this." The words hung in the damp air. The propaganda leaflets they had been given showed Americans as demons, white demons with cruel faces. But the men at the fence today had been different, dark-skinned, careful, kind. Aiko said nothing. She listened to the rain and the harmonica and wondered who was playing, wondered what he was thinking out there in the dark. Dawn came gray and wet. Isaiah stood in the trench beside the fence, mud sucking at his boots. The pipe joint had failed overnight, and brown water flooded the ground inside the women's compound. "Hand me the wrench," he called to Eddie. Eddie splashed through the water, tools clanking in his hands. Behind them, Lieutenant Pierce stood watching, clipboard tucked under his arm, face smooth and unreadable. Isaiah waded deeper into the flood. The water was cold and smelled of earth and rust. He knelt, feeling for the broken joint with his fingers. Metal scraped against metal as he worked the wrench. Inside the compound, the women clustered near the fence. They watched in silence. Isaiah could feel their eyes on his back, on his hands, on the concentration in his face as he twisted the joint tight. One voice rose above the others, the translator from yesterday. Her English was clear and startling in the morning air. "We've never seen men like this." The words weren't meant for him. She was translating for the others, explaining what he was doing, but the phrase landed in Isaiah's chest like something heavy and true. Lieutenant Pierce's pencil stopped moving on his clipboard. An MP near the gate called out, "Hey, no talking to the prisoners." The translator went silent, but she didn't look away. Isaiah finished tightening the joint and stood, water streaming from his rolled-up sleeves. He tested the pressure. The pipe held. The flood began to drain, pulling back from the women's shelter like a slow tide. He gathered his tools and nodded once in the translator's direction, not speaking, just acknowledging the work done. She nodded back, barely, a movement so small it might have been nothing. "Move out," Lieutenant Pierce said, voice clipped. "Chow lines in 20 minutes." Isaiah climbed out of the trench, Eddie behind him. As they walked back toward their tent line, Isaiah glanced over his shoulder. The women were still watching. The translator stood at the fence, her hands gripping the wire, her face turned toward the morning sun. He filed the image away, knowing he would see it again in his dreams. The supply yard smelled of diesel and canvas. Isaiah stood in line behind two white sergeants, waiting his turn at the quartermaster's window. Eddie shifted from foot to foot beside him. "What are we asking for again?" Eddie whispered. "Gravel and canvas," Isaiah said, "for drainage." The white sergeants ahead of them collected their requisitions and walked away, laughing about something Isaiah didn't catch. When he stepped up to the window, the clerk barely looked at him. "What do you need?" "That. Gravel, 2 loads. Canvas sheeting, 10 yards. The clerk flipped through his logbook. "What for?" "The POW compound's flooding." The clerk's eyes lifted. "POWs? That's not your problem, Sergeant." Isaiah kept his voice even. "Medical said it's a cholera risk. We're fixing it." The clerk grunted and made a note. "I'll need authorization." "From who?" "Your CO." Isaiah had already cleared it with the captain that morning. A careful conversation where he proposed a screened wash line to prevent disease, never mentioning dignity or kindness, only sanitation and regulation. The captain had signed off with a weary wave, probably just to end the conversation. "Got it here," Isaiah said, sliding the paper across the counter. The clerk stamped it without reading. "Loads ready at Bay 3. You got 2 hours before I need the truck back." Outside, Isaiah and Eddie loaded gravel onto a trailer, shoveling in rhythm. The sun climbed higher, turning the air thick and heavy. Doc appeared with an inventory card in his hand. "Pierce was in the medical tent this morning," he said quietly, "counting crates. Said he's doing a full audit next week." Isaiah kept shoveling. "Let him count. He's looking for something to hang on you, Zay." "I know." Eddie leaned on his shovel. "Why's he got it in for us?" "Because we're good at our jobs," Doc said. "And because we're black. That's 2 reasons too many for men like him." Isaiah checked his watch. If they left now, they could reach the compound by late afternoon. Enough time to set the posts and hang the canvas before curfew. Enough time to give those women 1 clean hour. "Let's move," he said. The canvas hung in clean white sheets, forming a privacy screen around 3 sides of the makeshift wash area. Isaiah hammered the last post into the mud while Eddie ran the water line through a coiled pipe. The late afternoon sun slanted through the canvas, turning everything gold. Inside the compound, the translator, Aiko, he'd heard Sister Michiko call her, organized the women into small groups. She spoke in rapid Japanese, her hands moving as she explained the rotation. The first group stepped behind the screen. For a moment, there was only the sound of water running, pipes creaking, hoots squelching in mud. Then, quietly, laughter. It was a small sound, astonished and bright. One woman laughed, then another, and the sound rippled through the compound like light on water. Isaiah had heard plenty of laughter in his life, but never quite like this, never so surprised by its own existence. An MP at the far corner of the fence moved toward the screen, craning his neck to see through the gap in the canvas. Isaiah stepped between him and the wash area. "Need something, Corporal?" The MP stopped, just checking the line. "Line's fine. Eddie, adjust that canvas on the left." Eddie moved quickly, closing the gap. The MP glared but walked back to his post. Doc stood nearby, medical kit open, watching a girl with a fever drink from a clean cup. He caught Isaiah's eye and nodded once. Approval, or maybe just acknowledgement. The sun dropped lower. Steam rose from the warm water, drifting over the wire like small ghosts. Isaiah could hear the women talking behind the screen. their voices mixing with the sound of running water. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Relief, gratitude, dignity returning in small measures. When the shadows grew long, he called out, "Last rotation, 10 minutes, then we shut it down for curfew." Aiko emerged from behind the screen, hair damp, face flushed from the warm water. She looked at Isaiah across the muddy ground and said in English, so quietly only he could hear, "Thank you." He nodded. No words, just the acknowledgement passing between them like a promise neither could name. Rain tapped on the canvas roof. Isaiah woke before dawn, the darkness still thick around him. He lay on his cot, listening to Eddie's breathing and Doc's quiet snoring, and thought about the women behind the wire. He'd slept in his clothes, boots lined up beside the cot within arm's reach. Old had it. In this army, a black soldier learned to be ready for anything. Doc stirred in the corner, striking a match to light the lantern. Yellow light bloomed in the tent. He pulled out a small notebook and began writing. Inventory of medical supplies, checking what they had against what they needed. "Morning," Doc said without looking up. "Morning." Eddie rolled over, rubbing his eyes. "What time is it?" "Early," Isaiah said. "Go back to sleep." But Eddie sat up, reaching for the letter he'd been writing the night before. The paper was wrinkled, spotted with mud. He'd been trying to tell his mother about the work here, about helping people who needed it, but the words kept coming out wrong. How could he explain giving water to the enemy? How could he make her understand that sometimes the right thing didn't fit inside the rules? "You still working on that?" Doc asked. "Can't get it right," Eddie said. "Keep thinking the sensors will black it all out anyway." "They will," Doc said. "Just tell her you're safe and doing your job. That's all she needs to know." Isaiah swung his legs off the cot and reached for his boots. His mind was already moving through the day's work, checking the wash line, testing the pipe pressure, maybe requisitioning more soap if Pierce would allow it. Doc closed his notebook. "We're low on quinine, down to maybe a week's supply, and the sulfa powder's almost gone. Can you stretch it?" "I can try, but if cholera comes through that compound, we'll need more than I've got." Isaiah nodded. "I'll talk to Pierce. Request what we need." Doc's face went still. "You sure that's wise? Man's been watching you like a hawk." "Don't have a choice. Those women get sick, it spreads to everyone." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Dawn was coming, gray and reluctant. Isaiah laced his boots tight and stood. Time to face another day. Time to ask favors from a man who wanted to see him fail. The quartermaster tent was bright with electric lights strung from the ceiling. Lieutenant Pierce sat behind a folding table covered in ledgers and requisition forms. He looked up when Isaiah entered, and something cold flickered in his eyes. "Sergeant Coleman," Pierce said. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. "What can I do for you?" Isaiah stood at attention. "Sir, requesting additional medical supplies. Quinine, sulfa powder, antiseptic solution." Pierce leaned back in his chair. "Medical supplies? For your unit?" "For the POW compound, sir. Doc Whitfield says cholera risk is high with the flooding." Pierce picked up a pencil and tapped it against his ledger. "I see. And you're concerned about the health of enemy prisoners." "Concerned about disease spreading to our men, sir." "Of course." Pierce flipped open a ration chart, running his finger down the columns. "Let me check what we have available." He took his time. The minutes stretched. A clerk in the corner typed on a manual typewriter, keys clacking in rhythm. Isaiah stood still, hands at his sides, breathing steady. Finally, Pierce looked up. "I can authorize a limited allotment, half of what you requested." "Sir," Doc said. "Half, Sergeant. That's what's available. Unless you'd like to explain to the captain why you need full medical supplies for prisoners while our own men make do with less." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "No, sir." Pierce stamped the requisition form and pushed it across the table. "You're spending a lot of time at that compound, Coleman, making sure those women are comfortable, building them wash lines, bringing them medicine." He smiled, thin and cold. Some might say you're getting too involved. Just following sanitation protocol, sir. See that you do. Dismissed. Isaiah took the form and turned to leave. As he reached the tent flap, he glanced back. Through the gap in the canvas behind Pierce's desk, he could see wooden crates stacked under a tarp. Red Cross emblems. Medical supplies. More than enough for 10 compounds. He filed the image away and stepped into the morning light. The wash line ran smooth and steady. Isaiah stood to the side, watching the water flow through the pipes he'd laid yesterday. The sun climbed higher, turning the compound into a steam bath. Aiko moved among the women, translating his instructions about conserving water and keeping the drainage clear. Her voice was calm, professional, but Isaiah noticed how carefully she avoided looking at him directly. Smart. The MPs were always watching. Sister Michiko organized the rotations, her movements brisk and efficient. He'd stopped glaring at the American soldiers. Not quite trusting, but not hostile either. Progress, Isaiah thought. A young girl stumbled coming out from behind the canvas screen. Her legs buckled. Doc was there in seconds, catching her before she hit the mud. Fever, Doc said, pressing his hand to her forehead. Hi, could be malaria, could be something worse. He laid her down on a piece of canvas Eddie had spread on the ground, elevating her feet with a rolled blanket. From his medical kit, he pulled a small envelope of sulfa powder. Part of the limited supply Pierce had authorized that morning. Mix this with water, Doc told Aiko. Have her drink it slow. Aiko knelt beside the girl, speaking softly in Japanese, coaxing her to sip from the cup. The girl's eyes were glassy, unfocused, but she drank. Isaiah hammered together a small platform from scrap wood, just big enough to keep one person's feet out of the mud. Not much, but something. He set it beside the girl. For when she's strong enough to sit, he told Doc. Around them, the other women continued washing, but their voices had changed. They were humming, melody fragments that didn't match any song Isaiah knew, but the rhythm felt familiar. Something old. Something about endurance. The sound mixed with the running water, the clink of tools, the low conversations in two languages that shouldn't meet, but did anyway. Here, in the mud and steam, an MP corporal appeared at the fence. Wrap it up, weather coming in. Isaiah looked at the sky. Dark clouds building to the east. 15 more minutes. Now, Sergeant. Isaiah caught Aiko's eye. She nodded once, understanding, and began moving the women toward the shelter. The mess tent smelled of boiled potatoes and weak coffee. Isaiah sat with his squad, eating in silence while rain drummed on the canvas roof. Around them, other tables buzzed with conversation and the scrape of metal trays. Eddie pushed his food around his plate. That girl, you think she'll be okay? Doc's good, Isaiah said. If anyone can help her, he can. At the next table over, 2 white privates talked loud enough to be heard. Heard they got a bathhouse over at the Jap compound now. Next thing you know, they'll be asking for room service. Another voice. Heard a colored sergeant's running it, getting real friendly with the enemy. Isaiah set down his fork, slowly, carefully. Doc's hand touched his arm. Don't. I'm just eating my dinner, Isaiah said quietly. That's right, you are. And that's all you're doing. Eddie's face was red. They got no right. They got every right, Doc said, and they know it. That's why they're talking loud. They want you to react. Don't give them what they want. The white privates stood, carrying their trays toward the disposal bins. One of them bumped Eddie's chair as he passed. Excuse me, didn't see you there. Eddie started to rise. Isaiah's hand clamped on his shoulder. Sit down, Eddie. But sit down. The privates laughed and walked away. The mess tent went back to its usual noise, but the damage was done. The rumor was out there now, spreading like smoke through the camp. Negro sergeant getting too friendly, breaking fraternization rules, forgetting his place. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tent poles. The blackout whistle blew. 15 minutes to lights out. Isaiah stood, tray in hand. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. In his tent that night, He took out his harmonica, but didn't play. The music felt too raw, too revealing. He wrapped it in a cloth and tucked it under his pillow. The wind screamed through the tent lines. Somewhere in the darkness, trouble was building. He could feel it coming like the storm. Morning came with the wind still blowing. Isaiah was checking the fence line drainage when Lieutenant Pierce appeared, 2 MPs at his side. "Inspection," Pierce announced. Isaiah straightened. "Sir?" "Hygiene verification. The captain wants to make sure protocols are being followed at the POW facility." It was a lie. The captain hadn't ordered any inspection. But Isaiah couldn't say that without calling a white officer a liar, and that would end only one way. "Yes, sir." Pierce walked the perimeter of the wash area, making notes on his clipboard. He checked the canvas screens, the pipe connections, the drainage channels. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were hunting. He stopped at the supply box where they kept the soap rations. "These are supposed to be locked." "They're secured every night, sir. We open them during wash hours." "I see." Pierce made another note. "And who distributes the soap?" "The translator, sir. She counts out portions according to the rotation schedule." Pierce turned toward the women's shelter. Aiko stood near the entrance, Sister Michiko beside her. He walked toward them, boots squelching in the mud. "You," he said to Aiko. "You speak English?" Aiko looked at Sister Michiko, then back at Pierce. "Sukoshi," she said. "A little." "How much is a little?" Pierce asked, his voice casual, almost friendly. Aiko shook her head, eyes down. "Sukoshi, small." Pierce smiled. "Interesting, because I heard you speaking perfect English the other day." "California accent, someone said?" Isaiah's heart went cold. He stepped forward. "Sir, if there's a protocol issue, I can address it with—" "I'm talking to the prisoner, Sergeant." Pierce's voice went hard. "Step back." Isaiah stepped back. Every muscle in his body wanted to move forward, to stand between Pierce and Aiko, but he couldn't, not without making everything worse. Pierce leaned closer to Aiko. "Where did you learn English?" Aiko said nothing. "I asked you a question, prisoner." "Leave her alone," Sister Michiko said in Japanese. Aiko translated softly, "She says I learned from books." Pierce straightened. "This compound is under strict fraternization regulations. Any unauthorized contact between American personnel and enemy prisoners is a court-martial offense. Is that clear, Sergeant Coleman?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because I'll be watching." He turned and walked back toward the gate, NPs following. After he left, Isaiah met Aiko's eyes for just a second. She looked terrified. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, wanted to promise that Pierce couldn't touch her. But he couldn't promise that. Not to her, not to himself. The supply yard was busy with morning deliveries. Isaiah returned to requisition more soap, trying to act like everything was normal. Like Pierce's inspection hadn't just put a target on his back. A supply truck idled near the quartermaster tent, 2 privates unloading wooden crates. Isaiah walked past, heading for the requisition window, when Eddie grabbed his arm. "Zay, look!" Eddie nodded toward the far corner of the yard, near the officers' club. A tarp covered a stack of crates, but one corner had come loose in the wind. Underneath, Isaiah could see the Red Cross emblems, medical supplies. The same ones he'd seen behind Pierce's desk. "Those serial numbers," Eddie whispered. "They don't match the manifest from yesterday. I checked." Isaiah's mind raced. Pierce was supposed to be distributing Red Cross supplies to the entire camp. Aid packages, meant for wounded soldiers and prisoners alike. But those crates were going somewhere else. Somewhere private. "Don't say anything," Isaiah told Eddie. "Not until we're sure. But if he's stealing, we need proof, real proof, not just a mismatched number." A staff sergeant appeared, blocking their view. "You boys need something?" "Just picking up requisitions," Isaiah said. "Then get moving. This area's restricted." They walked away, but Isaiah filed everything in his memory. The location of the crates, the serial numbers Eddie had seen, the nervous way the sergeant had appeared, like he was guarding something he shouldn't. The wind gusted, pulling the tarp higher. For just a moment, Isaiah saw more crates beneath, a whole stack of them, all marked with Red Cross emblems, all hidden away where they shouldn't be. He'd been asking himself why Pierce hated him so much. Now he knew. It wasn't just about race or rules. It was about witnesses. Isaiah had seen too much, asked too many questions, refused to look away. And men with secrets didn't like being watched. A weather siren wailed across the camp. Storm warning. The sky had turned the color of iron. Isaiah grabbed the soap requisition and hurried back toward the compound. If the weather broke hard, those women would need shelter reinforced. There wasn't much time. The air felt electric. Isaiah could taste metal on his tongue, the taste of a big storm coming. He worked fast, checking the canvas screens, tightening the guy lines on the women's shelter, making sure the drainage channels were clear. Iko helped organize the wash rotation, moving the women through quickly. Everyone could feel the urgency in the air. The wind had picked up, pulling at clothes and hair, carrying the smell of rain from miles away. Isaiah handed her a canteen he'd cleaned and filled that morning. Their fingers didn't touch, but the gesture passed between them clear as words. Small kindness, small defiance. She pressed something into his hand when she returned the empty canteen, a paper crane, folded from a scrap of rice paper, lacquered somehow to resist water. It fit in his palm, weightless and perfect. He started to speak, but she shook her head quickly. The MPs were watching. Doc appeared at his elbow. "We got a problem. 3 more fever cases, and 1 girl's showing diarrhea. If it's cholera." "It's not cholera," Isaiah said, more hope than certainty. "Not yet. Not yet. But it could be." Doc looked at the women huddled in the shelter. These conditions, the mud, the crowding, the standing water, we're 1 outbreak away from disaster. Isaiah turned to the MP at the gate. "Permission to keep the wash screen up overnight, for disease prevention." The MP shook his head. "Regulations say all temporary structures come down at curfew, no exceptions. But if it rains, then it rains, not my problem." The first drops hit, fat and heavy, smacking against the canvas like thrown stones. Within seconds, the drizzle became a downpour. Isaiah and Eddie worked fast, pulling down the screens, coiling the pipes, securing everything that could blow away. The women retreated to their shelter, but it was already leaking. Water dripped through the seams, pooling on the ground. Sister Machiko organized them into the driest corner, the younger ones in the middle, the older women forming a protective ring around them. Iko stood at the entrance, rain soaking through her thin clothes, watching Isaiah work. He wanted to say something, wanted to promise he'd come back at dawn, that he'd fix the drainage, that he wouldn't let them drown in the mud. But an MP shouted, "Clear out! Curfew in 5!" Isaiah caught Iko's eye one last time. She nodded. He nodded back. Then he turned and walked into the rain, the paper crane tucked safe in his pocket. The tent shook with each gust of wind. Isaiah lay on his cot, listening to the storm build. He couldn't sleep. His mind kept circling back to the women in that leaking shelter, to the fever cases, to Pierce's inspection and the hidden crates and Iko's frightened eyes. He pulled out paper and a pencil, started writing a letter he knew he'd never send. "Dear Mama, you asked me in your last letter what I'm doing over here. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could explain how strange this war is. How the enemy isn't always who they say, and how sometimes the people in your own uniform are the ones you have to watch. I met someone, not like you're thinking. Just a woman who's on the wrong side of the wire, speaking a language I don't know, but somehow I understand her anyway. She's scared. They all are. And I keep thinking, what if that was you? What if you were the one locked up, hungry and sick, and some soldier decided whether you got water or not, whether you lived or died? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I just know I can't look away." He stopped writing, read it over. Then slowly, carefully, he tore the letter into small pieces. Words like that would get him in trouble if a censor found them. Words like that could get him killed. Outside, boots splashed through puddles. Voices, sharp, official. Isaiah sat up. The tent flap opened. Two MPs stepped inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Sergeant Coleman? Yes. Tool inventory check. Orders from Lieutenant Pierce. Isaiah stood. At midnight? In a storm? You questioning orders, Sergeant? Eddie was awake now, and Doc. They watched as the MPs went through the tool chest, counting wrenches and hammers, checking serial numbers against a clipboard. They didn't find anything, because there was nothing to find. But Isaiah understood. This wasn't about tools. It was a message. I'm watching you. I can come for you anytime. The MPs left without a word. Doc sat up, face grim. This is bad, Zay. Real bad. I know. Then you need to step back. Stop going to that compound. Let someone else handle it. Isaiah looked at him. Would you, if it was you? Doc was quiet for a long time. Finally, no, I wouldn't. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, Isaiah lay back down and tried to sleep, knowing that dawn would bring trouble he couldn't yet see. The shouting woke Aiko before dawn. She sat up, heart pounding, as flashlights swept through the shelter. The other women pressed back against the canvas walls, eyes wide with fear. Two MPs burst in, rain-soaked and angry. Everybody up! Inspection! Sister Machiko stood. What is this about? They ignored her. One of them walked straight to the corner where Aiko slept, shining his light on her bedding. He kicked at the blanket, and something fell out, an envelope, sealed, with English writing on the outside. Aiko's blood went cold. She'd never seen it before. What's this? The MP demanded. I don't know. He ripped it open, pulled out a single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned it, and his face hardened. Love letter, from one of the colored engineers. He looked at Aiko. You want to explain this? I've never seen that before. Someone put it there. Sure they did. He grabbed her arm. You're coming with us. Sister Michiko stepped forward. She's telling the truth. The second MP pushed her back. Stay out of this or you'll be next. They dragged Aiko out into the rain. She looked back at the shelter, at Sister Michiko's stricken face, at the younger women crying. Then she looked across the muddy ground toward the engineer camp, as if she could call out to someone who couldn't hear her. Behind the wash-line posts, half hidden in the mud, she saw it. A wooden crate with a Red Cross emblem, partially covered with canvas. It hadn't been there yesterday. Evidence. Planted. Just like the letter. Move. The MP shoved her toward an interrogation tent near the camp perimeter. The rain poured down, washing away her footprints, washing away any chance of proving the truth. She was alone now. Just her word against the letter, against the planted evidence, against whatever lie they'd already decided to believe. In the distance, thunder rolled. Or maybe it was artillery. She couldn't tell anymore. Isaiah was lacing his boots when Doc burst into the tent. They took her. They took the translator. Isaiah stood. What? MPs arrested her about an hour ago. Found some kind of letter, they're saying, and medical supplies hidden near the wash line. Doc's voice was tight. They're saying you did it. You and her. Fraternization? Theft. Eddie swore. Isaiah just stood there, feeling the trap close around him. Pierce appeared at the tent entrance, two MPs flanking him. His face was calm, almost pleasant, like he was enjoying this. Sergeant Isaiah Coleman, you're under arrest for improper relations with an enemy prisoner and theft of military medical supplies. You'll be held pending a field hearing. Isaiah's mind raced. The letter. He'd never written any letter. The supplies. They were Pierce's own stolen goods, planted to frame him. But how could he prove it? I want to see the evidence, Isaiah said, and I want counsel. Pierce smiled. Negro sergeants don't make demands. You'll see what you're shown at the hearing, if there is one. Eddie stepped forward. This is bullshit and you know it. An MP's baton came up fast, catching Eddie across the ribs. He went down hard, gasping. Doc grabbed Isaiah's arm. Don't move. Don't give them an excuse. Isaiah stood perfectly still as they shackled his wrists. The metal bit into his skin, cold and tight. He could feel his future narrowing to a single point: court-martial, dishonorable discharge, maybe worse. They marched him out into the rain. The storm had strengthened overnight, turning the camp into a river of mud. Water ran everywhere, pooling in low places, turning trenches into streams. As they walked past the POW compound, Isaiah looked toward the shelter. He couldn't see Aiko, couldn't see any of the women clearly, just shapes behind canvas, huddled against the weather. But he saw the wash line posts already leaning in the mud, saw the drainage channels he'd dug, already overflowing, saw everything he'd built beginning to collapse. The rain poured down. The trap had sprung, and there was nothing he could do but walk forward into whatever came next. The holding tent smelled of mildew and fear. Isaiah sat on a wooden crate, wrists still shackled, listening to the rain hammer the canvas. Through the gap in the tent flap, he could see Doc outside, arguing with a white captain about medical protocols and the right to examine a prisoner. They weren't listening. They never listened. Lieutenant Pierce stood under a rain slicker, dry and smug. "The hearing will commence at 1400 hours, he told the captain. "Field tribunal. 3 officers. It won't take long." "This man has a right to proper charges," the captain said. He looked uncomfortable, like he knew something was wrong, but didn't want to dig too deep. "The charges are clear: fraternization with the enemy, theft of medical supplies. The evidence is documented." Isaiah spoke for the first time since they'd locked him up. "I want to see the evidence, the letter, the manifest for those supplies." Pierce turned slowly. "You'll see what the tribunal decides you need to see. That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works, boy." Pierce's voice dropped low, venomous. "You think the Army cares about one colored sergeant and what he did or didn't do with a Jap prisoner? You're nothing. She's nothing. This hearing is a formality." The tent shook with a particularly strong gust. Rain started to pool at the corners, seeping under the canvas walls. Outside, Eddie appeared, limping, one hand pressed to his ribs. He caught Isaiah's eye through the tent flap and tapped 2 fingers against his leg. Their old signal. Trouble downstream. Isaiah followed Eddie's gaze. Beyond the tent, down the slope, he could see the POW compound. Water was rising around it. The fence posts were listing, and the women's shelter, the canvas was ripping in the wind. He stood. "The compound's flooding. Those women need to be moved." Pierce didn't even look. "The MPs will handle it." "There aren't enough MPs, and they don't know the drainage." "Sit down, Sergeant." Isaiah stayed standing. Through the rain, he could see it clearly now. The water was rising fast, brown and churning. The compound was in the lowest part of the camp. If the storm got worse, and it was getting worse, that whole area would be underwater within the hour. And Aiko was somewhere in that chaos, under interrogation, with no one to speak for her. Aiko sat on a folding chair in the interrogation tent, soaked to the bone, shivering. An MP stood guard at the door. Another sat across from her, the planted letter spread on the table between them. "Just tell us the truth," he said. "Did the Negro sergeant give you this letter?" "No." "Did he speak to you?" "Only about work, water lines, schedules. But you speak English. Perfect English. California English." Aiko said nothing. She'd been protecting that secret for so long. But now it didn't matter. They already knew. "Where did you learn it?" the MP pressed. "Los Angeles." The words felt strange on her tongue after months of hiding them. "I was born there. My family moved back to Japan in 1941. Before Pearl Harbor." "Yes. Convenient timing." She looked at him. "My father was dying. We went to be with family. I was 17. The MP made a note. "And now you're here, translating for prisoners, getting friendly with American soldiers." "I was doing my job. Your job doesn't include love letters." "I never received that letter. Someone put it in my bedding." Outside, the wind howled. The tent shuddered. Water began seeping under the canvas walls, pooling around the chair legs. The MP looked at the rising water, then at the guard. "We need to move this." But before they could stand, a shout came from outside. "The compound! The fence is going down!" The MP ran to the entrance. Aiko followed, and he didn't stop her. What she saw made her blood freeze. The POW compound was flooding. Water rushed through the broken fence posts, sweeping away everything: bedding, supplies, the carefully organized rotation schedules. The medical tent where the fever patients lay was tilting, one corner submerged. Sister Michiko stood in the water up to her knees, trying to hold a stretcher above the surface. The younger women clung to each other, screaming in Japanese. The MPs at the compound gate just stood there, radios crackling with static, waiting for orders that weren't coming. Aiko pulled free from the guard's grip and ran toward the compound. "We have to move them! They'll drown!" An MP grabbed her arm. "You're under arrest. Then arrest me later." She switched to Japanese, shouting at Sister Michiko. "Get the sick ones to high ground, now!" Sister Michiko nodded and started organizing the women. They lifted the stretchers, stumbling through the rising water. Aiko turned to the MPs. "Help us, please!" They looked at each other, uncertain. Their radios crackled again, nothing but static and the sound of the storm swallowing every signal. Eddie slipped the bolt cutter into Isaiah's hands during a lightning flash that turned the whole world white. The thunder that followed shook the ground. "Doc got it from the tool shed," Eddie whispered. "Said you'd know when to use it." Isaiah looked at the shackles on his wrists, then at the holding tent entrance, where one NP stood guard, watching the flooding compound with growing alarm. He thought about regulations, about courts-martial, about everything he'd lose if he broke these chains. Then he thought about Aiko, about the women, about the fever patients in that tilting medical tent. He thought about what his mother had taught him. Sometimes the right thing costs everything. You do it anyway. Lightning cracked again. In that flash of white light, Isaiah snapped the bolt cutter through the chain linking his wrists. The shackles stayed on, but his hands were free. The MP spun around. "Hey!" Doc stepped in front of him. "My patient needs medical attention." "That's regulation. You want to explain to a captain why you denied medical care?" The MP hesitated. That was all the time Isaiah needed. He burst out of the tent, Eddie right behind him. Doc followed, his medical kit banging against his hip. "Where do you think you're going?" the MP shouted. Isaiah didn't answer. He ran through the rain toward the compound, shackles jangling on his wrists like broken bells. Behind him he heard the MP's whistle blowing, heard shouting, heard boots splashing through water. Two of Isaiah's squad, men he'd served with for a year, men who trusted him, fell in beside him without a word. They knew what this meant, knew they were throwing away their careers, but they ran anyway. At the compound, Pierce was screaming into a radio. "I said hold your positions. Do not enter the compound." A junior captain, the same one who'd looked uncomfortable during the arrest, stood nearby, staring at the flooding. "Sir, those women will die if we don't. I gave an order." The captain looked at Isaiah, running toward them through the rain, looked at the women struggling in the water, made a choice. "Stand down," he yelled to the MPs. "Let them through." Pierce's face went purple. "I'm the ranking officer, and I'm not watching people drown." The captain turned to Isaiah. "Get them out, now." Isaiah hit the fence line at a full run. The water was knee-deep and rising. Isaiah waded into the compound, the current pulling at his legs. Eddie and the others spread out, forming a human chain. "Doc, triage," Isaiah called. "Who moves first?" Doc pointed to the medical tent. "Fever cases. They can't walk on their own." Aiko appeared through the rain, hair plastered to her face, shouting commands in Japanese. The women responded instantly, years of military discipline cutting through the chaos. They formed lines, passing supplies hand to hand, lifting stretchers. Sister Michiko grabbed one end of a stretcher. Isaiah took the other, Together they carried a delirious girl through the current toward higher ground. "Again!" Isaiah shouted. They went back, again and again, each trip harder than the last as the water rose higher, the current stronger. An MP, young and scared, finally waded in to help. Then another. Even some who'd been jeering at the bathhouse were pulling women out of the flood now. Regulations forgotten in the face of simple survival. Iko worked beside Isaiah, translating his orders, organizing the women with the same calm precision she'd used for wash line rotations. Their eyes met once, briefly. No time for words, only the shared understanding that this moment mattered more than any rule. Canvas slammed into the water behind them. The medical tent had finally collapsed. Doc swore and dove under, pulling out a box of supplies before it could wash away. "The ridge!" Isaiah pointed to higher ground, 50 yards away. "We move everyone there." They formed a longer chain now, Americans and Japanese, soldiers and prisoners, black and white, all holding hands in the flood, because that was the only way anyone survived. Thunder flashed overhead. The rain came harder, stinging like thrown gravel. Isaiah pulled the last woman from the compound, an elderly nurse who could barely stand. He passed her to Eddie, who passed her to the next man in line, who passed her to safety. Then Isaiah saw it. Beyond the compound, near the officers' club, the tarp had torn completely free. Red Cross crates sat exposed in the rain. Serial numbers visible, stacked like evidence boards for anyone to see. And Iko saw it too. They reached the ridge, gasping. The wind had carved out a pocket of shelter against a broken palm tree. Doc checked pulses, counting heads, making sure everyone had made it. Iko stood beside Isaiah, both of them breathing hard. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke, but clear. "Those crates, down there, those are the supplies you asked for, the ones he said weren't available." Isaiah nodded. "I know. Someone needs to see them, before the rain washes the markings away." Eddie was already moving, stumbling down the slope through the wind. He pulled a flashlight from his belt and shone it on the nearest crate, the beam cutting through sheets of rain. An MP followed him down. Then the junior captain, curiosity overcoming caution. "Hey!" Pierce's voice cut through the storm. He came running, pistol drawn, slicker flapping behind him. "Get away from there! That's restricted!" The captain pulled one of the crates open. Inside, morphine, sulfa powder, quinine, enough to stock a field hospital for a month. All of it stamped with serial numbers that should have been distributed weeks ago. "What the hell is this?" the captain demanded. Pierce's gun swung toward Isaiah. "This is that Negro sergeant's doing. He's been stealing supplies, hiding them." "Liar!" Iko's voice rang out, strong and clear, in perfect English with her California accent laid bare for everyone to hear. "I saw the manifests. I saw him request these supplies, and you denied them. These are yours, your theft, your crime." Pierce's face twisted. "You don't get to talk. You're the enemy. You're—" He leveled the pistol at Isaiah. His finger went white on the trigger. Iko stepped between them. "If you shoot him," she said quietly, "you shoot me first. And I was born in Los Angeles. I know my rights. I know truth from lies. And I will testify." Thunder cracked directly overhead. The rain poured down like judgment. Time seemed to stop. Pierce's gun trembled in the rain. Iko stood perfectly still, water streaming down her face. Behind her, Isaiah could see his whole future balanced on the edge of this moment. The captain moved first. "Lieutenant Pierce, lower your weapon. She's a prisoner. She's a witness, and so am I." The captain gestured to an MP. "Disarm him." The MP hesitated, caught between two officers. Then he reached out and took Pierce's pistol. Gently, respectfully, but he took it. Pierce exploded. "You're all fools! Can't you see what this is? A colored sergeant breaking fraternization rules, stealing supplies, and you're believing the enemy over me?" "I'm believing the evidence," the captain said. He pulled a crate closer, comparing serial numbers with a soggy requisition form from his pocket. These numbers match a shipment that was supposed to go to the field hospital 3 weeks ago. The same shipment you reported as lost in transit. Doc appeared breathless, holding something in his hand. Found this in Pierce's tent. Thought it might be relevant. It was a ledger page, rain-soaked but legible. 2 sets of numbers, one official, one real. Pierce's own handwriting documenting every crate he'd diverted, every theft he'd committed. Doc looked at Isaiah. I grabbed it this morning, before the arrest, just in case. The captain read the page, his face hardening. Lieutenant Randall Pierce, you're under arrest for theft of military property, falsification of records, and conduct unbecoming an officer. An MP, the same one who'd taken the pistol, moved to cuff Pierce. Pierce lunged at Isaiah. This is your fault! You couldn't just stay in your place. You had to play hero for these Jap bitches. The MP pulled him back. Another helped. Within seconds, Pierce was in shackles, screaming accusations into the wind. They led him away, his voice fading into the storm. And the fraternization investigation is closed. You both acted with integrity under extraordinary circumstances. Isaiah's legs almost gave out. Eddie caught his arm, holding him steady. The rain began to ease, not stopping, but softening. The worst of the storm was passing. The chaplain's tent had been transformed into a makeshift hearing room. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting warm light on wet faces. The captain sat behind a field desk, a stenographer beside him with a rain-spattered notebook. Isaiah stood, still wearing the shackles on his wrists, the cuffs themselves, though the chain was broken. No one had found the key yet. Aiko stood beside Sister Mishiko, both of them wrapped in dry blankets someone had found. The younger women waited outside, quiet for the first time since the storm. This tribunal is convened to review the events of the past 48 hours, the captain said. He sounded tired. Sergeant Coleman, you broke arrest. That's a serious charge. Yes, sir. You also saved 17 lives, according to everyone here. Doc stepped forward. Sir, if I may, Sergeant Coleman acted to prevent loss of life. That's not just allowed under military regulations. It's required. The captain nodded. Noted. He turned to Aiko. You claim the letter found in your possession was planted. Yes, sir. And you can prove this? The handwriting, she said. It doesn't match Sergeant Coleman's requisition forms. I can show you. She pulled a soggy requisition slip from her pocket, the one Isaiah had signed for gravel days ago. The chaplain compared it to the supposed love letter. The writing was completely different. One neat and precise, the other crude and rushed. This doesn't match, the chaplain confirmed. Sister Michiko spoke, her English halting but determined. Sergeant Coleman never speak private with us. Only work, only water, medicine. He is, she searched for the word, honorable. The captain made notes. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. In the sudden silence, someone coughed. Water dripped from the tent roof. The medical supplies. The captain continued. Lieutenant Pierce has been charged with theft and falsification. The evidence supports these charges. A formal court-martial will be convened at headquarters. He looked at Isaiah. You're cleared of all accusations. Your record will be annotated to reflect your actions during the emergency. He stood. Everyone else stood too. One more thing, the captain said. New orders came through this morning. All POWs at this facility are being transferred to a mainland processing center. Tomorrow at dawn. He looked at Aiko. That includes you. Aiko's face went very still, I understand. Isaiah felt something crack in his chest. Tomorrow. They had until tomorrow. The hearing ended. People filed out into the clean, storm-washed air. Dawn came pink and gold, the sky scrubbed clean by the storm. Isaiah stood on the ridge road, watching trucks idle in a line. Exhaust rose in the cool morning air like breath. The women climbed into the trucks one by one, helped by MPs who'd spent the night rebuilding the shelter they'd torn down, who'd carried fever patients through the flood, who'd seen something in the chaos that changed the way they looked at prisoners. Aiko was the last to board. She stood at the truck gate, Sister Michiko behind her, and looked across the muddy road to where Isaiah waited. He pulled something from his pocket, his spare harmonica, wrapped in oiled cloth. He'd cleaned it, dried it, made sure it would survive the journey. She walked toward him. The NP at the gate didn't stop her. "For the songs you already know," Isaiah said, placing it in her hands. She looked at the harmonica, then at him. "I grew up in Boyle Heights," she said quietly. "My father had a record player. Jazz, blues, spirituals." She smiled, sad and true. "I knew the words to Go Down Moses before I knew Japanese poetry." She pulled the paper crane from her pocket, the one she'd given him days ago, now lacquered somehow, hardened against weather and time. "Yours and mine," she said, "both learned to hate in uniforms, but not everyone, not you." From the truck, one of the younger women called out in halting English. We had never seen men like this. Kind. Others took up the phrase, their voices transforming it from shock to tribute. "Kind. We remember. Thank you." Sister Michiko bowed, deep and formal. Eddie, standing beside Isaiah, bowed back. Aiko held Isaiah's eyes one more time. "If the world is different after this war, if people learn something, it will be because of moments like these. Small mercies, small rebellions." "I hope you're right," Isaiah said. "I hope we both are." She climbed into the truck. The gate clanged shut. The engines revved. Isaiah watched until the convoy was just dust on the horizon, until the sound faded to nothing, until there was only the morning and the work waiting to be done. Eddie touched his shoulder. "Doc says we should rebuild the wash line, for whoever comes next." Isaiah nodded. "Then let's get to work." He walked back toward the compound, where his squad was already gathering tools and pipe sections. The mud had dried in places, showing the footprints of yesterday's rescue, American boots and Japanese sandals, side by side in the earth. Somewhere in his pocket, the paper crane rested against his heart. He pulled out the harmonica Aiko had returned to him, his old one, the one he'd played that first night. He put it to his lips and played a single note, clean and clear and hopeful. The sound carried across the empty compound, across the rebuilt fence, across the ridge where women had stood in the rain and been saved by men who chose mercy over orders. The note faded into the morning silence, but the truth remained, hardened like lacquered paper, strong enough to survive any storm. We had never seen men like this, and because of that, the world would never be quite the same.